What if I told you that in the Middle Ages drinking water could kill you on, that people avoided it at all costs? Before we dive into this forbidden truth, hit subscribe right now, cause the history you're about to hear is the kind they buried in secret archives. A comment with what you think people drank instead, and like this video so the truth doesn't get erased again. Now, close your eyes and imagine it's the year 1325. You're in a medieval village, the streets muddy and narrow, lined with timber-framed houses leaning dangerously toward one another. The stench of animals, smoke, and rot hangs in the air. A church bell tolls in the distance. You walk to the village well, the heart of the community, where women and children gather with wooden buckets. The water glimmers faintly in the morning sun, but no one dares to drink it. Not the peasants, not the merchants, not even the priest who blesses it. Because here, water is death. Why? Because medieval water was far from pure. Wells were often shallow, dug near cemeteries or waste pits. Rivers ran dark with filth. Tanneries dumped toxic chemicals. Butchers poured animal blood into streams, and chamber pots were emptied from windows straight into flowing water. People washed clothes, animals drank freely, and diseases spread unseen. Without any knowledge of bacteria, people didn't know why water made them sick. They only knew that it did. So, instead of water, they turned to beer, ale, and wine. Having children. The weak ale they drank daily wasn't meant to intoxicate, but to survive. Its brewing required boiling, which killed many of the invisible killers. Alcohol preserved it for longer, and herbs added flavor. Wine, especially in southern Europe, was the safer choice, and even peasants drank watered-down versions when they could afford it. To drink water was to risk your life. To drink ale or wine was to live. But this isn't just about survival. This is about power. The first clue comes from a little-known manuscript once kept in a French monastery, the Liberaco Vitae, or Book of the Water of Life, written in the early 1300s. It warned that clear streams carry hidden death and urged people to boil water with rosemary, thyme, or honey. Yet the church condemned it, calling it dangerous speculation. Within a year, the manuscript disappeared, and the monk who wrote it was expelled. Some whispered he was poisoned. Why suppress simple advice about boiling water, lest knowledge itself was dangerous to those in power? Archaeology confirms what the texts hint at. Excavations of medieval cesspits in London and Paris uncovered jugs, mugs, and barrels filled with remnants of ale and wine, but almost no vessels clearly meant for water. Drinking water was nearly absent from medieval daily life. But here's the question no historian wants to ask. Was this simply cultural habit, or was it deliberate? Control of drink meant control of people. Monasteries produced massive quantities of beer. Nobles taxed alehouses. The church owned vineyards. If peasants learned that they could survive with nothing more than boiled water, the monopoly on survival would collapse. Beer and wine weren't just safer, they were profitable, and fear of water kept people dependent. Letters hidden in Vatican archives add weight to this suspicion. One from 1352, written during the Black Death, warned priests to condemn false cures of boiling water. It declared, "Let not man think he can cleanse what God has made unclean, lest he stray from his mercy." Translation: don't let peasants boil water, because survival comes only through divine blessings, symbolized by wine, controlled by the church. Sanitation became theology. Drinking became doctrine. But whispers of resistance surfaced. A German physician named Meister Gerhard secretly wrote pamphlets in 1370, teaching peasants to boil water with herbs. For a moment, people believed. But within months, Gerhard vanished. His name was erased. Only fragments of his notes survive in private collections today. How many others tried to speak and were silenced? This silence had consequences. Imagine a peasant family. The father drinks weak ale with bread. The The mother brews beer in a small cauldron. The children sip from mugs of small beer every day. They never touch water. They don't even question why. Water's for washing, for animals, for the cursed poor who can't afford ale. To drink, it is shameful. And so, the cycle continues. In castles, the difference was even starker. Nobles enjoyed imported wines, spiced with cinnamon and cloves. Their banquets overflowed with goblets of red and white, while peasants at the foot of the hill clung to weak beer and hope. Water, even for the wealthy, was seen as primitive the drink of beasts, not men of refinement. In churches, priests preached that wine was holy, the blood of Christ, while water was earthly, tainted. Imagine the psychological power of that message. Salvation in one cup, damnation in the other. But here's the most chilling detail. Outside of Europe, people were drinking water safely in China. By the 6th century, tea had become central to life, not just as a drink, but as a health ritual. Why? Because tea required boiling water, which made it safe. In the Islamic world, water was tied to ritual purity. Cleanliness was part of faith. Wells and aqueducts were carefully maintained. Travelers described cities with flowing fountains, where water was sacred and safe to drink. Europe, by contrast, drowned in silence and filth. Why? Were Europeans less intelligent? Or were they prevented from learning the truth? Mainstream historians argue that people simply prefer beer and wine. But if that were true, why did manuscripts vanish? Why were physicians silenced? Why do pastoral letters condemn boiled water as heresy? Why did the church, which controlled vast vineyards and breweries, benefit so greatly from a population that feared the simplest drink of all? The truth may be that the greatest secret of medieval daily life wasn't tea about what people ate or were writ, was about what they couldn't. Tea, drink, water, the very essence of life, made forbidden. And think of the cost. The Black Death killed millions between 1347 and 1351. Was it truly divine punishment, as the church insisted? Or was it spread faster because of contaminated wells and rivers no one dared to purify? One whistleblower monk, known only as Frater L., wrote in 1362 that boiling water could slow the spread. His letter was redacted. His monastery burned. Imagine if Europe had listened. Would millions have lived? The conspiracy deepens when you realize the symbolism. Wine became sacred. Beer became survival. Water became death. And those who controlled the first to control life itself. The nobility in the church didn't just rule by sword or sermon. They ruled by thirst. Now, fast forward. When toilet paper was introduced, it represented civilization itself. When toothbrushes came, it represented hygiene. But when water finally became drinkable, purified, filtered, controlled, was nothing short of a revolution. For centuries, people have been denied the most basic truth, that boiling water could save them. When clean water finally flowed in cities, it shattered 1,000 years of silence. And here is the revelation. What if history's greatest conspiracy wasn't about wars or kings, but about thirst? What if water was deliberately forbidden to keep people dependent, to preserve wealth and power? What if generations lived and died in ignorance, not because they couldn't learn, but because they weren't allowed to? So the next time you pour a glass of water, crystal clear and safe, remember, wasn't always this way. For centuries, water was the most dangerous drink in Europe. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't meant to be. Because history isn't what you were told. It rarely is. If truth could be buried once even as something as basic as water, could it happen again? Subscribe now, because truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds its voice.